My pass didn't send a warning shot, it sent a PDF. It arrived silently in my inbox, a resume attached to a job application, and when I opened it, the name on the screen punched the air right out of my lungs. Daniel Peterson, it was him, the architect of my most public humiliation, the boy who had systematically dismantled my confidence in front of 200 people. Now he was applying for a senior data scientist position, and I, Chloe Morgan, was the head of strategic staffing. I was the gatekeeper, and my ghost had just come knocking on the gate. My life is a fortress I built brick by painful brick. Here at Viridia Analytics, one of Austin's most competitive data firms, I am the one who asks the questions. I am the one who holds the power. I decide who gets a chance, who gets a key to the kingdom. For a woman who spent her formative years feeling invisible and voiceless, the authority is a comfort, a balm on an old wound. My days are a smooth, predictable rhythm of data-driven recruitment, interviews, and salary negotiations. It is a world of order and control, and Daniel Peterson's resume was a grenade thrown right into the middle of it. I leaned closer to my monitor, a cold dread coiling in my stomach. It had to be a coincidence, but the details on the page were a series of tiny, irrefutable confirmations. High school, Westwood High, here in Austin. College, the University of Texas, same as me. It was him. The boy king of our high school, the one with the easy grin and the casual cruelty that he wore like a Letterman jacket. The world around me, my quiet corner office with its panoramic view of the downtown skyline, seemed to fall away. I was 16 again, standing on a brightly lit stage, my heart hammering against my ribs, the sound of laughter echoing in my ears. To understand the vertigo I felt, you have to understand the state debate finals of my junior year. Debate wasn't a hobby for me. It was everything. I was a quiet, awkward kid with glasses and a desperate need to prove I was smart. On the debate stage, armed with facts and rhetoric, I wasn't awkward Chloe anymore. I was a contender. I had a voice. And I was good. I was one match away from winning the state championship. Daniel Peterson was in the audience. He wasn't a debater. He was the star quarterback, the kind of guy who moved through the world with an effortless entitlement, collecting followers like a magnet collects iron filings. He and I didn't exist in the same universe until he decided to make mine implode. I kept my debate notes in a worn leather-bound journal. It was my secret weapon. It wasn't just case studies and rebuttals. In the margins, I wrote my fears, my insecurities, little motivational phrases to psych myself up. Things like, "They don't think you're smart enough, prove them wrong." Or, "Don't let your voice shake." It was deeply personal. I had left it on my chair for a moment to get a bottle of water before the final round. That was my mistake. I was standing at the podium ready to deliver my final, winning rebuttal. The room was silent. Then, one of Daniel's friends, a popular girl named Jessica, walked up to the stage. She said she had a message of good luck from my friends. She smiled sweetly, and then she began to read. Not a message of good luck. She was reading from my journal. My private, terrified thoughts read aloud in a mocking, sing-song voice to the entire auditorium. "Don't let your voice shake," she chirped, and the crowd tittered. "They don't think you're smart enough." The laughter grew louder. I saw Daniel in the third row, leaning back, a triumphant smirk on his face. He caught my eye and gave me a tiny, dismissive shrug. My mind went completely blank. The words, my carefully constructed arguments evaporated. I just stood there, mute as the timer beeped, signaling that my time was up. I had forfeited. The wave of shame was so absolute it was like drowning. That single calculated act of cruelty didn't just cost me a trophy. It stole my voice for years. It taught me that my ambition was a liability, that my passion was just ammunition for others. I spent the rest of high school and most of college trying to be invisible. My career, my office, my authority, it was all a reaction to that moment. It was my fortress against ever feeling that powerless again. And now, the man who had laid the first stone of that fortress was asking me to let him in. My first impulse was pure, unadulterated vengeance. The reject button on the applicant portal seemed to pulse with a righteous glow. One click, it would be that simple. He'd get a form email, he would never know it was me. It would be a quiet, perfect revenge, a rebalancing of the universal scales. But my hand trembled over the mouse. Rejecting him sight unseen felt cowardly. It felt like the 16-year-old girl on the stage running away. It felt like he was still winning. Then a different idea began to form, a darker, more satisfying one. I didn't just want to reject him, I wanted to see him. I wanted him to walk into my office, sit in the chair opposite my imposing desk, and have to ask me for something. I wanted him to see what the quiet girl he had tried to break had become. His resume, I had to admit, was impeccable. His experience in predictive modeling was exactly what we needed for a new, high-stakes project. The professional in me knew he deserved an interview. The wounded teenager inside me knew he deserved to be put on the spot. I decided to let the teenager have her day. I broke all my own rules. I didn't pass his resume to a junior recruiter for a phone screening. I scheduled the final round interview directly. I sent the calendar invitation myself. Chloe Morgan, head of strategic staffing. I wanted him to see that name. I wanted him to have a few days to wonder. I wanted him to walk through the doors of Viridia Analytics, knowing exactly whose domain he was entering. The morning of his interview, I dressed like I was going into battle. A sharp charcoal gray suit that radiated authority, heels that made a satisfyingly firm click on the polished concrete floors, red lipstick that felt like a declaration. I am in control, I repeated to myself. This is my stage. But when my assistant's voice came through the intercom, "Chloe, your 10 o'clock is in the lobby." A jolt of pure teenage terror shot through me. He walked into my office, and for a heart-stopping moment, he looked exactly the same. The same confident posture, the same easy smile that never quite reached his eyes. He was older, of course. There were lines around his eyes, and his hair wasn't as thick. But the essence of him, that unshakable self-assurance, was still there. He was still Daniel Peterson. I rose from my chair, my professional mask cemented in place. I extended my hand over the vast expanse of my desk. "Daniel, Chloe Morgan, thank you for coming in." He shook my hand, his grip confident. "It's a pleasure, Chloe. Thanks for seeing me." He met my eyes, and then I saw it. A tiny, almost imperceptible flicker. A brief widening of his eyes, a slight tightening of his jaw as recognition dawned. The smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He knew. He absolutely knew. A cold, victorious thrill surged through my veins. The game was on. I conducted the first half of the interview with surgical precision. I grilled him on complex algorithms, on team management failures, on his 5-year plan. He was good. I'll give him that. Annoyingly good. Articulate, brilliant, and polished. But he was also rattled. I could see him struggling to reconcile the powerful woman in the corner office with the memory of the girl he'd broken at a debate tournament. His answers, while correct, started to feel more rehearsed. He kept adjusting his tie. The effortless confidence was beginning to fray at the edges. Then I went in for the kill. "So Daniel," I said, leaning back and steepling my fingers. My voice was calm and measured. "Our culture here at Viridia is built on radical transparency and psychological safety. We believe how you communicate under pressure is a direct reflection of your character. Can you tell me about a time your communication failed? A moment in your past you look back on with profound regret?" I saw the trap spring shut in his eyes. He knew this wasn't about a missed deadline or a poorly worded email. The professional facade shattered. He paled, and a single bead of sweat traced a path down his temple. I think everyone has moments they're not proud of," he stammered, his voice losing its confident timbre, "especially when you're young." "I'm not interested in generalities," I pressed, my voice like ice. "I want a specific example, an action you wish you could take back, something you're genuinely ashamed of." The silence in the room was a physical thing. He stared at me, the mask completely gone, his expression a mixture of panic and dawning horror. This was it, the moment I had unknowingly waited for more than a decade. I had him, cornered, exposed, powerless, on my stage by my rules. This was my victory. "Yes," he finally whispered, his voice hoarse. "And what would that be?" I pushed, savoring every second of his discomfort. He looked down at his lap, at his hands twisted together. He looked defeated. I had won, but then he did something I never could have anticipated. He took a deep, shaky breath, and when he looked up, his eyes weren't defiant. They were filled with a raw, soul-deep exhaustion. "Chloe," he said, my name sounding strange and heavy on his tongue. "Of course I remember, the state debate finals. I've never forgotten it. What I did to you. It was monstrous." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. This was not part of my script. "There is no excuse for it," he continued, his voice quiet but steady, stripped of all its earlier bravado. I was an insecure, pathetic kid who got his sense of self-worth from putting other people down. Taking away something that you were so good at, that you loved so much. It was the cruelest thing I've ever done. It's followed me. I'm not saying this to get the job. I know that's not going to happen. And I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't deserve that. When I saw your name on the email, I knew I had to come here and look you in the eye and tell you that I am profoundly and deeply sorry. The air in the room shifted. My righteous anger, the fuel that had propelled me for years, suddenly felt like cheap smoke. The power I had been wielding felt ugly. My meticulously planned revenge had just been dismantled by a messy, unexpected, and devastatingly sincere confession. I was furious with him for stealing my anger, for making this complicated, but mostly I was just overwhelmed by a sudden aching grief for the 16-year-old girl who lost her voice on that stage. I was completely adrift. The professional and the teenager inside me were both silent, stunned. After a long moment, I managed to find my own voice. "Thank you for your candor," I said, the corporate platitude sounding absurd. "We'll be in touch." He gave a small, resigned nod, stood up, and shook my hand. His grip was different now, hesitant and humbled. He walked out of my office, closing the door softly behind him. I sat there for a long time, staring at the closed door, my victory tasting exactly like ash. 2 days later, the universe decided to test me again. My boss, our CEO, called an emergency all-hands leadership meeting. Our biggest client, a national retail giant, was facing a catastrophic failure in their predictive models for the upcoming holiday shopping season. Their entire inventory and sales strategy was at risk. To make it all worse, the data scientist we had just hired to lead that very project had been poached by Google. We were on the verge of losing our most valuable contract. The mood in the boardroom was tense. We needed a world-class expert in predictive modeling, and we needed them yesterday. The CEO was scrolling through a list on his tablet. "What about this guy, Daniel Peterson? His resume is a one-to-one match for the project's needs. Chloe, you interviewed him on Tuesday. What's the word?" Every head in the room swiveled in my direction. My professional credibility and my personal history were on a collision course. I could end it right there, a single sentence. He wasn't a good fit for our culture. No one would challenge me. It was my call. I could finally definitively win. The teenager in me was screaming, "Bury him. This is your chance." But I saw his face in my office. I heard his words, "I am profoundly and deeply sorry." And a quieter, stronger voice inside me asked a different question. Who was I going to be? Was I going to let a 16-year-old's pain dictate a multi-million-dollar business decision for a 34-year-old executive? Was that really power? Or was I just letting Daniel Peterson, the high school version of him, still have control over me? "He's the most qualified candidate we've seen in a year," I said, my voice clear and steady, surprising even myself. "His technical skills are exceptional. I think we should make him an offer immediately." A week later, Daniel Peterson started at Viridia Analytics. The first few months were an exercise in excruciating professionalism. We moved around each other like two planets in a careful, distant orbit. I watched him constantly, waiting for a crack in the facade, for a hint of the old arrogance. A part of me almost wished for it, to prove that my initial instincts had been right. But the old Daniel never showed up. The man who worked down the hall was a stranger. He was focused and brilliant, but he was also humble. He listened intently in meetings. He spent hours mentoring junior analysts. He was the first to arrive and the last to leave. People on his team didn't just respect him, they genuinely liked him. And slowly, grudgingly, I had to admit that I did too. One evening, we were the last two on our floor, both working late against a deadline. He appeared in the doorway of my office, looking hesitant. "I still don't understand why you did it," he said quietly. "Why you hired me." I didn't look up from my screen. "You had every reason to blackball me forever," he went on, "and I would have deserved it. I just wanted to say thank you, and I promise I will not let you down." A knot I had carried in my chest for 18 years finally loosened. I looked up at him, not as my tormentor, but as my colleague, a man trying to build a better life, just like me. I realized that my fortress wasn't a prison, it was a foundation. I was strong enough now that I didn't need to hide behind its walls. His actions hadn't defined my life. I couldn't let them define my leadership. "What you did in high school almost broke me," I said, my voice even and clear. "Your apology didn't erase that, but it mattered. You're doing good work, Daniel. That matters too. Keep it up." He just nodded, and in that moment, a silent peace treaty was signed between us. It wasn't forgiveness, not exactly. It was something more complex. It was acceptance. The real ending to this story isn't dramatic. It happened on a warm Saturday at the annual company picnic at Zilka Park. I was talking with some colleagues when I saw Daniel walking over, holding the hand of a little boy of about 5 who was hiding behind his dad's leg. "Chloe," he said, and his smile was genuine, unguarded. "I wanted you to meet my son, James." I knelt down to the little boy's level. "Hi, James. It's a pleasure to meet you." The boy gave a shy wave. Daniel looked from his son's face to mine, his own expression filled with a quiet gravity I couldn't quite read. Then he looked back at his son and said something that stopped my heart. "James," he said softly, "this is Chloe. She's my boss, and she's the person who gave your dad a second chance when he didn't deserve one." If you had told the 16-year-old me, standing mute and humiliated on that stage, that Daniel Peterson would one day say those words to his own child, I would have thought it was a cruel joke. But there we were. My revenge was never going to be his failure. The real victory wasn't in the rejection letter I never sent. It was in building a life and a character strong enough to offer grace instead of retribution. It was never about forgiving him. It was about freeing myself. And standing there under the big Texas sky, I finally was.